What's going on, Legionnaires, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. If you're new to the channel, do me a favor and hit that sub button, hit that notification bell, and make sure you're not missing any of the awesome content we have coming out. Now, for the last video we're going to put out this morning, we're going to be diving into Way of X, issue number 1. Now, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the X-Men lines, so if you haven't been keeping up with it, go ahead and check out the link in the description as well as the top of this video. It'll get you completely caught up on everything that's been going on in this super awesome X-Men lines. And the Way of X, you know, it's a really interesting story, and I have a lot of fun with it. Now, this is going to be focusing on NIGHTCRAWLER, and it's written by Simon Spurrier, and the art is by BOB QUINN. Now, with that being said, let's dive into this breakdown. Alright guys, so as we dive into this first issue, we see Charles Xavier seeing a man, seeing something that scares him, someone that calls him a betrayer, and it wakes him from his sleep. And waking from his sleep, he telepathically communicates with NIGHTCRAWLER, trying to see if he's awake. And lucky for the professor, NIGHTCRAWLER is awake. He is definitely up right now, because right now they are in the middle of the Venice insertion. And this is where we see NIGHTCRAWLER, Blink, DJ, Loa, and Pixie all making their drop into Venice. Now, obviously, NIGHTCRAWLER's a little bit busy here, but he tells Xavier, you know, usually when people try to talk to a priest in these small hours of the night, either it follows a sin or it precedes a death. But Xavier tells him, you know, it's nothing like that. I'm just gonna wish you good luck. You know, he's not telling him about the dream yet. He hasn't deciphered it enough to really come to him about it. So he leaves him with a good luck and Godspeed. Now we see our team make their descent into Venice. And as they go into this building, it's looking like a kind of museum, a museum of hate. Now, as they investigate this place a little bit further, they find out that this place is all funded by Orchis. You know, at first they had thought that they were just recruiting scientists and soldiers and things of that nature, but this is more than that. They've built a school for anti-mutant ministries. But as they're sitting here, peering in, spying on a class going on, they get caught, and the guy is able to yell loud enough that everybody hears. And so Pixie, using her mutant ability, kind of charms all of them into seeing crazy lights and angels and all kinds of beautiful things. But one of them is wearing a gas mask, and he opens up fire. And we see DJ use his powers and put up a shield to block all the incoming rounds. Now the team, they got what they came for. They have all the information, everything that they need. But before they leave, Pixie does something unusual, but something that's becoming very common among mutants, especially young ones, because she wants these guys to feel guilty. And so we see Pixie walk up to the guy with the shotgun and get right in the barrel's face, and this guy unloads, blows her head clean off. Now all the other mutants, except for NIGHTCRAWLER, no, we're recording this, we're laughing, just like, how awesome was that? You know, that was so cool. Now, for these young mutants, this isn't a big deal because mortality doesn't exist anymore. They can be immortals. And so in a way, they're acting like young, arrogant gods who can never die, and they're just like, oh, watch me go die. Watch me do this epic death, and we'll play it back later after I'm resurrected. But NIGHTCRAWLER, he feels like this is just wrong. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, I don't know why it's wrong, but everything about this, it just feels off. It feels like we shouldn't be doing this. Now, back on Krakoa, NIGHTCRAWLER, he meets up with Magneto, because Magneto had received a message from him, saying that they found something in the Museum of Horrors. And NIGHTCRAWLER goes to show him, and this is where a bunch of the X-Men are standing around, and we see a giant statue of Magneto with rockets pointing towards the air. Now, everybody gets a great laugh out of this. But Magneto, he takes this as an opportunity to give a speech about how, you know, one time in history, mutants fought against other mutants, and they used the weapons of their enemies and blah, 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 blah. It's just one of those, you know, we are mutants, we're gonna rise up, we're gonna be better. He just uses it as an opportunity to turn the humiliation of him and turn it into kind of a motivational speech for all Mutantkind. Now, picking up briefly after this event, we see NIGHTCRAWLER popping up with Magneto, and him asking, like, what the heck was that, dude? Like, why did you go on that big old speech? You didn't have to do something like that. But Magneto says, you know, it was just a sermon, and come to think about it, you know, you were telling Cyclops that you wanted to start a mutant religion. But really, you know, Nightcrawler, yeah, he does want to do this. He does want to start a religion. But really what he's here to talk to Magneto about is the Crucible. Because Nightcrawler sees it as barbaric, as he sees it as murder. While all the other mutants, including Magneto, they see it as a ritual. A way of saying you're good enough to join the mutant nation. Now, in the midst of this conversation, we have an individual that comes up to Nightcrawler and says that she's lost. But Nightcrawler, he kind of dismisses her. He helps her along her way, but, you know, he's just so flustered with everything, the conversation with Magneto, seeing the kids, you know, blow their own head off, essentially. All this is messing with him, especially as someone who's a Catholic priest. You know, granted, his religion doesn't really stand anymore, but he's having such a hard time with everything that, you know, he points her on her way, and then he takes off. And this is when we pick up later that evening. And Nightcrawler, he's sitting over these kids, listening to them talk about an individual they call the Patchwork Man. And it's more or less seeming like a boogeyman that's really been appearing to kids more and more. In moments of fear and anxiety and doubt, emotions like that, they've been seeing what they call the Patchwork Man. Now, obviously, all the adults at this point have dismissed this as nothing more than children being children. Now, while Nightcrawler is sitting here listening to this conversation, he hears something behind him. He hears somebody behind him. And this is where he teleports and he tackles none other than Dr. Nemesis. Now, Dr. Nemesis looking quite a bit different here because he's kind of growing psychedelic mushrooms on his head. Now, their conversation is pretty unique here. And really, you know, Dr. Nemesis, he's a genius at the end of the day. And he's breaking it down to Nightcrawler in a way that really does make sense. Now, there's the theory that proposes that there's a limit to how many direct relationships an average human can maintain. It's roughly 150 or so. Beyond that, just to keep the peace, society requires abstractions, shared ideas, things that have no reality unless a majority chooses to act as if they do, i.e. laws, currencies, social rituals, figureheads of good and evil, so on and so forth, including mythologies. And in the absence of a truly remarkable mind expander to rapture all of them out of this pigmenty of dimension, Dr. Nemesis kind of put his hopes into Nightcrawler because he heard that he was working on something to unify. But Nightcrawler worries because what if he can't find these shared ideas? What if he can't find these social rituals? And Dr. Nemesis tells him, you know, theoretically speaking, violent societies, they collapse. But out of that, the strongest individuals, they usually invent rituals of their own. And we have a prime example of that example being the Crucible. And this is where we see Magneto fighting the one individual that was trying to talk to Nightcrawler earlier. And we see Magneto not pulling punches. He is just giving her the full force of everything he's got. She is getting cut up. She's getting bloodied. She is getting messed up. And as she's getting messed up, she looks to the crowd and she sees Nightcrawler. She sees Nightcrawler and calls to him and says, you know, I wanted you to do this because I heard you were so kindly. Because I heard that you were so kind and you made it quick. I didn't want to feel all of this pain. And this is where Nightcrawler, he interjects, he intervenes and stops Magneto from attacking her and lets him know that this is senseless, that she's not a fighter. But Magneto disagrees. He believes her to be a fighter, a warrior worthy of joining the mutants. And this is where we see Magneto make a sword out of metal shards and impale this woman, and she stops breathing. And we see Dr. Nemesis go and pick Nightcrawler up off the ground. You know, and what bothers Nightcrawler the most of this situation, it's not Magneto. It's the roaring cheers that he hears from the crowds. Now, we pick up the next day in the hatchery, and Nightcrawler, he's sitting here watching. You know, because right now, Pixie is getting ready to come out of her little egg sac, if you will. And as he sits here and watches all of this transpire, Professor Xavier comes up. and they have a conversation. And the conversation begins with Nightcrawler, because Nightcrawler wants to talk to him, but Xavier, he already knows. You know, he does ask for pleasantries on why Nightcrawler might be here, but we all know Charles knows this information already. And so they go down and they help her get birthed. And we see not only Pixie being reborn, but we also see our new team member, the individual that kept calling herself Lost. Now, her powers are gravitational neutrality. And so without her powers, she was in agony all the freaking time. Now, with her powers now back, she doesn't know how to use them. And everybody in the room that doesn't operate without gravity, they start throwing up. Because gravity's going crazy right now, and it's causing everybody to just start puking their brains out. Now, this is where Nightcrawler and Charles, they really start to dig into their conversation. And he asks the professor, you know, when was the last time that you walked in the garden? You know, there's wonder and hope, but there's also vice, violence, and death. A cheap death. You know, they can't all be playing off the hero, and they also can't all be down here being indispensable. The problem is, you know, Nightcrawler can give no good reason why mutants shouldn't behave as they do. Even at their most savage, he can find no moral flaw in these new emerging cultures. But he feels it. He feels something terrible coming. Something slipping through the cracks. Now, at first he thinks, you know, maybe this is just Catholic paranoia, but Charles tells him it's not. And this is where he kind of divulges some information, lets him know that he detected something, a presence, something that's extremely adept at hiding from Xavier. And from what he can tell, its actions are marked by surges of negative emotion, fear, anger, misery. He suspects that whatever it is, it's preying on these, preying on dreams, nightmares, and moments of weakness. And Cerebro at this point is quite certain that whatever it is, it's an Omega level mutant. And this is where Nightcrawler remembers the children speaking of an individual by the name of Patchwork Man. Now, this is when we're taken a little bit later on at a gravesite, the gravesite of Blindfold. And as Nightcrawler sits at this gravestone, he hears a voice talking to him, because Nightcrawler, he already had an idea of who this individual was. He had a feeling of who it might be, but he had to test that theory. And testing that theory meant coming to this gravestone, because Blindfold was really close to this Omega level mutant. And this is where we see Nightcrawler getting shocked, just getting messed up, and he's getting hurt. And whoever's doing this, you know, apologizes to him, lets him know that he doesn't deserve to get caught up in all of this, but this is all Xavier's fault, and lets him know that he's far too late, because the Legion is here, and the Legion is many. And this is where we see the arrival of freaking Legion. And that will be the end of this issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. So this, you know, this Patchwork Man that they've been talking about, it's freaking Legion. And we just saw him literally disintegrate Nightcrawler in an instant. So this is going to be 100% freaking interesting. I am super excited to see how all this is going to play out. Let me know what you guys think. If you haven't yet, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel, like this video, hit that notification bell, and until the next breakdown.